Alright, so let's assemble our evaluation switch. We've printed out all the spacer plugs for the evaluation switch, the leaf springs with 0 activation distance, the switch cover, switch base, and activation surface. And we've picked up a 15 millimeter hexagonal spacer along with our panel mount headphone jack and micro switch. And I'm going to work with the one that has the black insulation just because I like it better for wrapping the wire inside the switch base. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do, I have some other things I also use. One is going to be, I need a small screwdriver. This one has a flat head because the slots in the panel mount headphone jack are also slot heads or flat heads. And a little bit of super glue to attach the mini posts. The mini post to the associated spacer here, spacer plug. And then I have this jerry-rigged headphone jack tester. If it's working properly and I press the micro switch, this little LED should light up. That just tells me I've got good connectivity. You could use whatever you have on hand, an adapted toy or some other device. But I want to be checking that connectivity throughout my assembly here just to make sure I haven't messed something up. So first thing I'm going to do is sometimes these headphone jacks can be a little tight. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert this a few times just to loosen it up a bit. Take it out again. That should go all the way in, not stop part way. So just a couple of times to make sure that that's nice and ready to work with our switch. Then I'm going to take this small nut off of here, and it has, you can see it has 2 recesses. Those are on the front side. When you're assembling it, they're on this side, so that you can use those recesses to help you spin this on if necessary. But I'm going to set this aside so I don't lose it. Okay, so first test, I'm going to insert these wires into the S and T, which is sleeve and tip for those interested. Those 2 ports on the back here. Then I'm going to test it. So I'll make sure that the gate, I'm going to unscrew here. I'm going to watch inside here to make sure that the gate is down and that the slot is open. And it looks to be, I'm not seeing anything in there. Well, let's keep going. Nope, I don't see anything in there. Same with this one, just to be sure. Yep, there's nothing in there. It doesn't matter which of these wires goes in which of those openings. Just insert them and then screw down here. We don't want to pinch the insulation. We want to actually touch the bare part of the wire. We'll find out in a minute if we've done that right or not. I'll just tighten the screw, which tightens these into place. I'll put my test system in, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. I'm going to depress the micro switch. And it looks like it lights up. So far, we're good. Pull that back out. I'm going to move these out of the way for now, so I have some room to work. Alright, next we're going to put this headphone jack inside our switch base. There's an opening for the tip of this thing to go in. So I just set it down inside and then push it forward into that hole. Then I'm going to take, this is for me tough because I don't have delicate fingers, but I'm going to take this nut and put it on this threaded piece of the headphone jack, and I'm just going to gently, carefully spin this into place. And it looks like we got it first time. Keep that going on down. You can even grab these little indents here and help tighten it up by just pushing against those. All right, one more time, let's test it, make sure I didn't mess up any of the wires as I was doing that. And looks good again. Okay, now I'm going to wrap this cord inside here, and there are small raised walls underneath each one of these leaf spring pedestals, except where the headphone jack was. So I'm just going to squeeze it around there when I get there. But I'm just going to work my way around the switch, pushing this down in there, and you can use the tip of the plug there to help work it down behind, because I actually bring it around a couple times, so I need to put 2 layers worth behind those little walls. You got to work a little harder here when we get up near where the jack goes through. Just use something that you're not going to cut the insulation with, and they'll fit back in there. Just push it down behind. I'll even lift it over the top of this, work it around the other side of the switch, or not switch, I keep struggling with that word, the headphone jack, panel mount headphone jack. Keep going. We just want to get these wires out of the way so they're not interfering with anything. Okay, that went in there. One more. Then I can't really tuck it into this one and still get it to reach one of these slots. So I'm going to let it come out a little bit here as I wrap it around. I'm also going to take this protective backing off, the adhesive, and then you stick the wire in through this slot right here, and set actually this slot. Set this guy in place, and we'll just kind of push down on the adhesive so that's being held down. Make sure your wires are all behind their little retention walls. Okay, and now it's time to do my test one more time. Okay, nothing damaged along that way. So the switch base is really pretty much ready to go. If I were going to use a leaf spring, and I'm not going to do it on this first iteration, if I was going to use a leaf spring, the ones with the 2 arms, they can go either here or here, doesn't matter. They just sit up on top of those little pedestals. The ones with 4 arms, they will just go where they have to go. Just sit on top. You'll do them with the numbers up because you want this little post down here to actually engage the button on the micro switch. But the first thing I'm going to do is work without a leaf spring at all, so that I'm pressing directly on the micro switch and have the least amount of activation pressure required to do that. So I'll get out my super glue. And since we're working with an evaluation switch, I'm going to use the 6.0. You see that? 6.0 spacer plug. It's got, every one of the spacer plugs has a square indent in the back for one of these micro posts or mini posts to go in. Depending on your printer and the extrusion amount, you may be able to just squeeze it in. In fact, I think I'm just going to be able to squeeze this right in here and have it stay in place. If it's a little loose, you can always apply a little super glue. I think since super glue is a messy thing, I'm not going to use it right now. But you might want to do it going forward. There are 2 of these 6.0 spacer plugs in the spacer plug collection, just so you have. Oh, it fell out. So I guess I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with the super glue. In that there. Now put the spacer in. The mini post in. Trying to get it on my fingers. And we'll just set that aside for now to dry. Right there. Setting it aside to dry. That's just what it looks like right there. All right. And now we'll work on the spacer itself. So it has threaded screw here, and it's also threaded inside. So we'll start by taking our activation surface, and we're just going to gently get this started. Once it gets started, it works great, but you don't want to force it if it's not going in, because basically you're screwing into plastic, and that will strip if you aren't a little bit careful. This now goes through the hexagonal opening in the top of the switch cover, and finally, I don't know how close we are to dry here, but we're going to go proceed anyway. Now the spacer plug screws into the bottom of the spacer. Again, be gentle, make sure you're aligned properly and the threads are fitting properly, because you can force it and you can strip it. So that just slides in and out. The beauty here is that stainless steel hex spacer slides very nicely against, I think I got some on my fingers, slides very nicely against a 3D printed part without scraping, as 3D prints against 3D prints would normally scrape. And because that spacer is there, it's very hard to pull this out, pull it off. You have to disassemble the switch, unscrew the spacer. The beauty of the hexagonal spacer is you can turn the activation surface and replace it with another. If that were a round element right in here, well, then that would just spin and it'd be very hard to remove the activation surface. All right, so now we're just going to assemble it. It's ready to go. I don't need don't need any kind of leaf spring in here. So what we want to do is, there are little clips in the 4 corners of the top. There are indents at the top edge of the switch bottom. These clips are going to go into these indents. The bottom set of indents are if you're going to use where have I got one? Oh, here it is. If you're going to attach one of these screw-on mounts that uses a 1/4-inch camera mount to attach everything to something else, like part of a wheelchair frame. But we're not going to do that as part of this. That's what these lower indents are for. So now I'm just going to squeeze them together, line up the indent with a tab and squeeze. There it goes. I can hear it engaging. Let's test it. Okay, so that's ready to work with. It moves out further than you may like, but this is an evaluation switch. Its purpose in life is to choose what's the best activation distance and what's the best activation pressure. Once you actually do the custom switch, the top here will have, pull this out, it'll have just the right distance here on this little sleeve so that it fits up tightly against the spacer plug, and therefore it can't come out, it can only go in. But you'll see that when you make the custom switch. I think that's everything except to show that the first place I would start, where are you? Yeah, first place I would start in doing this evaluation would be with this. Focus. It's not focusing. I would start with this leaf spring. Its activation force index is 1, and it's as part of this set they all have an activation distance of 0 millimeters. You'll be swapping out this spacer for a 3.5 spacer, if I remember right from that matrix. You'll be switching it out for a 3.5 spacer plug when you make that switch. All right, that's the whole assembly process. No soldering, just some wire routing primarily.